So when we talk about Jest, it is designed and maintained by Meta. So what Jest does is we can, whenever we are writing a JavaScript application and we want to write test associated with or mostly with respect to unit testing, at that time we can consider using Jest. So like let's begin with installation of Jest. So to install Jest, there is one prerequisite. You should be having npm or yarn with you firstly, so you can easily get started with it. And when it comes to Jest, there is only one prerequisite. You should be knowing JavaScript. That's it, and you can easily start with Jest and write your test cases. So you can use npm or yarn or pnpm to write yourself just a test. And what you can do is after initializing your npm, I mean your any kind of JavaScript application, it can be Node, it can be Nest, it can be React, or anything you want. So here I've taken consideration of a basic npm project, which you can start with npm initpy. Then you can use yarn or npm to get just installed in your directory, in your root folder. And once you install Jest, this is how your package.json file will be looking like. So what you can do is inside the package.json file, inside scripts, all you can do is add Jest as your test. And by default, when you install Jest using yarn or npm, by default inside dev dependencies, it will be added. So let's move on to actually writing the test cases by using Jest. So here is how you can start along with Jest. So I have one file named as index.js, and so maybe a demonstration would be a good option here. So what I'll do is I'll jump into my VS Code. So what we can do is once you get your project initialized, you can see a structure like this in your root directory, where you will be having a JSON file, your source folder where you will be having your JavaScript files, and alongside you can maintain your test files as well. So what I've done is I have just created one index.js file. Let's focus on this function first. I have just written a simple function which just adds to number and returns it. So if I want to write test cases for this function, how I should be proceeding. So what you can simply do is you can create one file named as test index.test.js. Now it is not mandatory to have the name index since we had it as a file name, but it is a good practice to follow. If you have your file name as index.js, you can simply follow this naming structure, so it will be easy to maintain your test cases. So what I have done is here in my index.js file, I have just exported this sum function, and here in my test file, I have exported from there and I've imported here in my test file. So you can easily start writing the test cases here. So to write a test case, the structure which we have to follow is we will be using a test function, which will be nothing but your test case. So test case has two main things. First is description and second is your test function. So these two are mandatory things whenever you write your test case. So I'll just try writing one basic test case which we can to test this sum function. So coming here, I'll just provide one random description as suppose test sum. So this would be a description for your test case, and inside I will write the main test logic. So what I can simply write as expect. Then I'll call the sum function. I'll pass 2, 2, suppose, and I'll simply go with dot 2b, and the result of this function should be 4. So upon saving it, it start getting executed since I have few extensions here. So let's wait for it, and as we can see, yes, the test is good. So here what I have done is I have written a simple function named as expect. So what expect does it holds a value and helps you with more functionalities. So expect will be holding one value and 2b will be your basically an assertion. So what 2b does it just simply checks and compare. So after getting the result from some function, it will compare the result is equal to 4 or not, and if it is 4, then simply the test case will be passing. But what if I want to run this test cases from terminal? So what simply you can do is you can use yarn or maybe npm as well, and you can simply say yarn test. So what this will do is this will check what sort of test files you have in your root directory, and will start directly executing all of them. So one file basically is considered as one test suite here. So as we can see, one test case is passing, and simply our test case is getting executed. So this is how we can start. So going back to our presentation, so this is how easy it is to get started with Jest basically. So I've just mentioned the steps as well here, that how exactly you can run your first test. But if you would have seen here, I've used some functions here as I've used in my example as 2b. So what exactly this is? So in Jest terminology, this is called as matches. So what are matches basically? Matches are the basic building blocks which will help you in writing your test cases, and definitely it is not possible to write or maintain any of the test cases without using this expect and matches. So these are basic building blocks no matter what sort of framework you will be using. It can be React, it can be Jest or anything. These are the basic building blocks which will help you in writing the test cases for all of your applications. So let's dive deep into what exactly these matches are, or what sort of matches does Jest provides. So I've just written the index.js file which I'm using here, and we'll see what sort of matches we have. So I've mentioned first matches which I have explained previously, which is 2b. So when we will be using 2b function. So 2b is a function when we know that our function which we are testing will be returning primitive values. It can be an integer value, can be a string. So whatever the primitive data types we have in JavaScript, if your function is returning them and you want to test it, you can simply use 2b function alongside with your expect function. So this is when you will be using 2b. Now let's move towards the next assertion, or maybe next matcher, which is dot to equal. Now suppose there is a scenario where you won't be getting a primitive type in return, and what if you will be getting an array or maybe a map? So at that time, you can simply go with to equal function, and you can simply check whether the array or the map which I'm returning is passing or not. So what I have done is I have hard coded a map. So I have added first name and last name into it, and with expect this time I am using to equal function, wherein I'm just simply checking whether I'm getting this map in return or not. And if we'll get this, our test case will simply pass, or else it will be failing. So I'll demonstrate one failure scenario as well here. So I'll come back to VES code once. And in the case of failure, I'll just modify the test case which we have. So what we can do is, we all know that 2 plus 2 will be definitely 4. But what if I do 2 plus 2? And right here, I'm expecting the result should be 5. So this situation will definitely fail. So let's see whether it reacts to it or not appropriately. So as you can see, we have got the result that we are expecting 5, but we have received 4. So yeah, definitely 2 plus 2 will be 5, will be 4, but we were expecting 5. So yeah, this test case was supposed to be failed. So these were the two basic what we can say matches which we can use for primitive and non-primitive data types. But let's move forward to more advanced and more matches which we have in Jest. So what if, so the previously we saw two matches, with the first was 2b and the second was 2 equal. So these were checking entirely. Suppose 2b was checking the value, 2 equal was checking the entire map or entire list. But what if you want to check only one particular index or one particular element of an array or maybe of a map? So at that time we can simply go with to contain method of Jest. So I'll just quickly try demonstrating this, how we can exactly use to contain here. So what I'll do is I'll just modify this test case itself, and I'll just change the description test. Oh, sorry, test supposed to contain. You can give any sort of description which you want. There is nothing as it should be something, but it should be it should be readable. And if someone else come and see your test cases, they should be knowing by reading the description what exactly this test case contains. That is the simple logic behind having the description here. So if we say that, suppose I want to demonstrate firstly how contain works. So I'll take one array, suppose teams. Since IPL has been over recently, I've tried taking one IPL example only. Suppose KKR, since they won. Next we'll go with runner-ups, SRH. My favorite team. Then again, you will start saying I'm a Dhoni fan. No, guys, I am a CSK fan. But deep inside, you all know why everyone supports CSK. Just kidding. And the local team. So what we'll do is declare this function with to contain. And now if I want to check whether this array, which is teams, it has any of the value which I'm expecting here or not. Suppose if I want that the teams array is containing, I want to test whether the team array contains RCB or not. So I'll just write a test for it, and when I run this should work since we have RCB in our array. It's taking a time now. So we can see that the test is running fine, and we can see that, and definitely since RCB was present in this array, so it was very obvious that we will be getting a positive result in this case. So moving on to few more matches. So we have the next matcher we have is to throw. So when exactly we use to throw? To throw is a matcher when you are expecting that your function will definitely be throwing an error. So I've just tried mimicking a very famous example that we cannot divide a number by zero. And what if we do so? So definitely in that case, the function which we are using for dividing should be returning an error. So to test this kind of scenarios, that yes, whether my function is throwing then an appropriate error or not. At that time, you can simply go with this to throw matcher. And let's move on to few more matches which we have, and which will be helping you in other things as well. So before going to some advanced assertions, I'll quickly introduce you guys to negation. So uh, no matter what sort of matcher or assertion we have, it can be to be, to contain, to equals, whatever. If you want that, it should be, if you want to negate that particular operation, if you want to write a test case in a way that my result should not be 2, in that case, you can simply use dot not function in front of any kind of matcher you want. So here we have an example where I'm using dot not in front of 2b. So what this will simply do is my result should not be 0. And if I'm getting anything apart from 0, it will accept. And if I'm getting 0, it will be rejecting it. So this is simply how you can use this not. And this can be used with all sort of matches which we have here in Jest. So can be a good thing to use. So now we have covered primitive data types, we have covered arrays, maps, and in JavaScript, uh, there is a possibility where we will be getting null values, we'll be getting undefined values. So there will be definitely a possibility there where our function will be returning something apart from all the data types, or maybe the maps or arrays we have. So all these data types are basically null, undefined, NaN in JavaScript. So how to handle this? So to simply handle this, what we can do is we can use two methods basically. So the two methods are, first is to be null, and the second method is to be falsy. So what to be null is, when we are expecting that yes, my function will be returning a null value, and I want to have a test against it, that yes, my function should be returning a null value when we are sure that we will be getting null, exactly null. So it shouldn't be anything apart from null, which can be NaN or undefined or nothing like that. When you are very sure that you will be getting null as a result, at that time easily you can go with to be null. But when you are not sure that either you will be getting null, or you will be getting a zero, or you will be getting a NaN, anything, at that time you can go with to be falsy method. So what to be falsy method does, it accepts or it runs when you get zero, NaN, or a null value, or maybe an undefined value. At that time you can simply go with to be falsy. So similarly, we have to be truthy as well. So this works exactly opposite to this to be falsy function. What it does, it returns true when we we get one or a true value, or anything apart from null into our function basically. So at that time we can simply go with this to be truthy function, and let's move on to a few more matches which we have. So till the moment we haven't talked about anything with respect to strings. So when we come to strings, we have few more functionalities or few more type of tests we can cover with respect to strings, which are basically checking the length of string, whether we can go with substrings, and definitely we can use the equal method as well. But if you want to go with substring, you can simply go with the to match function. And if you want to check the length, at that time, yes, we have a function which is the to have length function. So well, here is an example of these two scenarios where we will be testing out uh, things with respect to string. So what I've done is I've written a test wherein I have considered one string which is named as Parth. So, and I'm expecting that this string which I'm passing here, it should have length 5. So as we can see, the string is of length 5. So in this scenario, our test will be passing. Similarly, if we come here to this to match function, so what I've done is I have written I'm just simply passing one string name as Christoph, and I've written one substring here inside the to match function, which is chri. So yes, chri is definitely a substring of this, and in this case, this is how we can simply check whether the substring is present or not. And if you want to learn more on matches, so we have few more matches. I mean, these are the basic matches which we have, and which will be helping you in writing and managing your test cases. But suppose if you want to learn more about matches, I've dropped the link here. You can easily use it and uh, get more insights on the matches. So this is all about the matches, and these are the basic building blocks which will be helping you throughout your testing, no matter what sort of application you are testing or what the complexity is. So, so does this means this is all about uh, Jest? So I'll simply say no. So if we consider, if we look that till now, what I have covered is the functions which we have, or the functions which I have been demonstrating were the starting functions. They were simply doing one task. There was no data coming, or there was nothing like that. So what if we want to test more advanced functions, or when it comes to JavaScript, we mostly use promises and asynchronous functions, and that time how to deal with this kind of function. So let's see how we'll be dealing with these functions. And this might be a reaction of many of us when we are executing asynchronous function. We don't know whether it is slow, or it's getting executed, or how things are going. So in order to handle this asynchronous function, what we can do is I've tried uh, taking an example of a promise function here. So Jest provides us to check the promise function, asynchronous function, and this will be helpful. Suppose if you are in the situation where if you are making an API call, or you are executing HTTP request, or you are doing the basic file operations. In all of the scenarios, this will be the things you will be needing to test your functions. So here, what I have done is I have one simple example, which says, which is a promise, and what I have done is I have set one basic timer, and I've used the resolve method. And inside this resolve method, I've tried passing one string, which is John Wick, and this is the timeout that after 1000 milliseconds, if we are not getting any sort of response, it should be terminated by default. So this is to handle if the time taken by the promise function to execute is way too long, and if you don't want to wait for that particular time, and you want after a particular instant that it should be terminated, you can simply set up a timer here. So we'll see how we can test this promise function. I'll quickly jump to VS Code. So the same promise function I have written here inside my index.js file. So in order to test this function, what we can simply do is test. I'll provide one description as test promise. My test function, and simply coming inside the test. So what exactly, how we will be approaching to test this promise function? What we'll do is return. Again, the same approach which we used previously is expect function. Since without expect, you won't be able to use the matches. So expect function, I'll try calling fetch promise function. So this is the function written in our index file. And once we get the result in our expect function, what we can do is results to be, and the string which we passed, which was John Wick. So here what I have done is I have written an expect function, which is calling that fetch promise function inside our index.js file, which is this one. And what this function does it simply returns the string which I have written, which I have mentioned here. So what the resolve function does it simply returns whatever value we are providing here inside the parameters. So here in expect, we'll be getting John Wick, and that is what we are expecting here. So this is how we can manage or handle the promise functions using Jest. So as we can see, our test case is getting passed. We'll see the similar thing in our terminal as well when we run yarn test. So here we should be getting the result as we had two test cases and both of them are passing. So let's see whether we get it or not. And yes, as you can see, we had two test cases and both of them have been passing. And we'll check for the other scenario, which is failing case as well. So let's try. Our promise function will get resolved, and yes, as we can see, the test is getting failed since we were expecting our promise function to return John Wick, but I mean, we are expecting our promise function to return John, but we are getting John Wick as the result. So this is how you can manage or maybe handle the promise functions easily with using Jest. So similar example I've tried quoting here in the file as well. So as we can see, this is what we have done. We have used the resolve function to check the positive scenario when the promise function is successful. But there can be a scenario where our promise function is failing. So what to do there? So in that case, what simply we can do is we can we can replace this resolve by rejects, and we can simply throw an error, whatever we want. Here I've simply mentioned as error, but this can be any kind of error which you want, which you would like to throw. So in the case of passing, you can simply use resolves. And in the case of failure of your promise function, you can simply go with rejects. So this is how you can handle the promise functions. And the other way to handle this asynchronous calls or maybe promise functions is by using async await. So here what I have done is, instead of using resolve or reject, I have simply written a asynchronous kind of a function wherein similarly I'm fetching the promise, I'm getting stored it into a data. And since this is a asynchronous kind of a function, we don't need a resolver or a reject function, any sort of a thing here to handle this. So these are two ways of simply handling the promise functions. The first one was using a resolve, and the second one is this async await function. So this is how simple it is when while dealing with promise functions or the asynchronous codes which we usually write when we are working into a project. So can be a really useful thing. And uh, let's quickly talk about timeouts. So as we have seen that if your test is taking a lot of time, so we can simply use timeout. So in if your test case, if your function is taking more time, then we can simply wrap the things around. So this is all about how we can exactly handle the asynchronous function calls here in Jest. And let's move on to next topic, which is mocking in Jest. So we'll talk about it. Uh, not this mocking. We'll go to how we can mock a function in Jest. So what I have done is, so actually before going to the example, what exactly mocking is. So mocking is, suppose if you mostly if you are dealing with APIs, or if you are getting something from backend, or you are running a HTTP request where you will be getting a data from backend or somewhere, wherever your data source is. In that cases, like if you want to isolate your test cases from other functions, what you can simply do is you can hard code the values. You can simply mock it to one particular type of request and response. In this case, what it will do is, suppose if you have already said that, okay, I will be sending this information, and every time you know that I will be getting the same response. So this is how you can simply isolate your test cases from other functions. So whenever your test cases is getting executed, it won't the other code won't be affecting your test cases. So here I've written a simple example wherein I am sending an HTTP request to GitHub and sending my username, and in return if the user name is correct, I'm simply getting a proper response, and if the username is not appropriate, we'll be simply getting an error. So in order to test this function, what we can simply do is we can write one test case. So what I have done is I have hard coded the username, which is octocat, and I'm in response I'm expecting login should be octocat, ID should be 1, name should be this, and email should be this one. So I'm simply expecting here that this should be equal when upon fetching the user. So this is how simply you can mock your function with whatever the data you want and the responses as well. So your entire test case will be isolated from the code which you have been writing. So uh, does writing test cases like this is one of the most essential topics when it comes to writing the test cases, that uh, your whatever the functions or whatever the files which are the JavaScript files which you have in your folder. So the test coverage makes sure whether each and every single line written in your code is getting covered by your test cases or not. This is what simply test coverage is. So uh, to get the coverage for your test, whatever you have written, you can simply do is, as we have seen previously in our package.json file, what you have to do is, in front of just, you have to simply write test coverage, I mean hyphen coverage, and you can mention all sort of files here. For all the files which you want coverage, you can simply mention them here. So I want coverage for index.js and mat.js. So you can simply mention them here, and you will be getting the coverage for it. So we'll quickly see what exactly the coverage is. So what I've done is I've written two files. First is math.js and second is math.test.js. So what I've done is I've written four functions. First is add, second is subtract function, multiply, and a divide function, which will simply take two numbers and perform the appropriate options. So in order to, so what I've done in the test file, I have added one test case for add function, one test case for subtract function. So the test case for multiply and divide function is missing in this case. So when we try getting coverage for this file, which is math.js, we'll be getting a result something like this, that yes, 50% of the functions have been covered, 50% of the lines have been covered, and yes, 50% of the lines have been left when we were writing the test cases. And it even provides us the number, the line number for which we have not written the test cases. So the line are from 10 to 15, which are basically from this return a multiplied by b to return a divided by b. So this is how we can get the coverage of our files. So it will simply give us that yes, you have been missing writing test cases for these files. So, and in order to achieve 100% coverage, this is what you should be doing. So what I have done is I have simply written test cases for each and every function. I have written for multiplication, divide, and yes, even for the error condition as well. If you miss this error condition, again you won't be getting an 100% coverage for your file. So this is how you can go with the test coverage, which will help you in getting whether all the lines which you have in your code have been covered by your some sort of test or not. So after adding this test cases for all the functions which we had previously, we can simply get the result as 100. So this is pretty much about what the test coverage is. So yeah, this was pretty much basics of what exactly Jest is, how we can use matchers, how we can handle the asynchronous function calls, how we can mock the data and get our test isolated. So this was a pretty much example mostly around vanilla JavaScript. But when you come towards projects, at that time you will be working with different frameworks. It can be React, it can be Angular, Vue.js, Nest.js, or any sort of. So Jest provides different functions when it comes to React. So if you would like to explore, I have attached all the links here, and I'll be sharing this presentation on the channel. So if someone wants, they can simply go to the links, and on whatever framework they are working, they can have the Jest implementation done there. So yeah, so we'll conclude. So here we conclude the topic for today. So I'll before concluding, I'll just answer one simple question: why why it is important to write unit test cases? So the quick answer to it would be that if you consider writing unit test cases while development itself, it will be really easy to find and resolve the bugs in the very first go when in our initial stages. So the more the later we get the bugs, it is very costly with respect to time, with respect to all the other aspects. So it is better to catch the bugs in the first initial phases when we are actually starting with the development. And this is where unit testing can help you out, and we can deliver a high quality product. So thank you everyone for joining.